Okay, we're rolling.
Okay, it is 7 o'clock. I'll call this meeting of the regular meeting of the town council to order. Would you please all join me in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Roxanne, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Dombrowski,
Here.
Mrs. Ingles.
Here.
Okay, I was gonna say I saw her. Mr. Irwin.
Here.
Mr. Marshall,
Here.
Mrs. McGrattan. Mary, you're on mute.
Okay. Here.
Okay. Mrs. Rodriguez,
Here.
Mr. Ryan,
Present.
Mr. Soms.
Here.
9 here, 0 absent.
Thank you. At this point, we have a presentation from the Board of Education. I see that they are here, so. So I'm not sure. Mike, are you providing?
That is the case, Mr.
Okay.
Dombrowski. So thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you, folks. We appreciate it. Again, our budget passed last week through the Board of Education. So we'll walk through the changes for that budget for this year coming up, the 22-23. Again, I think most of the counselors are aware, but we do have some new folks. Our strategic plan guides the work and the resources required to accomplish what we do for the Ledyard Public Schools. It's a comprehensive plan, and it was approved in 2017. We're getting ready to go through another revision on that coming up this year. And there's 4 overarching areas there. Again, it's our vision, the beliefs for the public school system and our students, our theories of action, and most importantly, from a budget perspective, the district priorities, making sure that we have a plan forward and we budget and execute accordingly. Next slide. So the budget priorities for 2022-2023, again, are driven by that approved strategic plan. In addition to maintaining our core programming, the budget also supports changing and growing instructional interventions that are needed to ensure all students are supported and their needs are addressed. Again, our 4 overarching areas are academics, art, agri-science. Thank you, Mr. Ryan, for pointing that typo out. And of course, athletics. Next slide. So for our 2022-2023 budget request, this was approved again by the Board of Education last week. It's $34,555,319. That's an increase from the current 2021-2022 budget of $883,349, or 2.62%. As a data point of that 2.62%, 1.41 are contractual increases. So the remaining 1.21% are some core operating items and the additional staff required to meet the changing district needs. And we'll walk through what those changing needs are now and what the staffing changes are. Next slide, please. So again, the key changes from 2021-2022, we do have some savings again this year from 4 estimated retirements, but we will retain those full-time equivalent heads, but there'll be new hire teachers. We do have $30,000 allocated for a kindergarten boot camp. When we get to the end of the presentation, we can definitely answer any questions on items as we go through. We are adding 1 full-time equivalent head for the library media specialist at the elementary level. Again, we've been trying to build some of these positions over time to make sure we're supporting our students, and especially the changing demographics within Ledyard and what some children coming into the school system here may need, depending where they've come from before. or just especially with everything going on over the last 2 years with COVID, there's definitely a need to make sure we're supporting these students. We're adding 1 full-time equivalent head for science, environmental, and agricultural, and that's at the middle school. Again, as you remember, we've now expanded the middle school, so we definitely need some more staff there to make sure we're properly supporting that mix of students. We're adding 1 full-time equivalent math interventionist, both again at the middle school, and a full-time guidance counselor at the middle school, again, helping make sure these students are getting the guidance, direction, and support they need as they both transition into the middle school and then work their way through making sure they're ready to go to the high school. And then we're adding 1 full-time equivalent head for health and physical education at the high school. We're also increasing our foreign language teacher at the high school from a 0.67 to 1 full-time equivalent head to make sure we have the required staffing there to support all the all the students that do want to take a foreign language. And as everyone knows, our paraprofessionals are essential to what we do at all the schools. So there's $22,000 in this budget for professional development for those paraprofessionals. We need to make sure that we're constantly investing in them so they can provide the best support possible to our students. Next slide. This is an item we have in the budget each year under our process, and these are basically as the budget's put together by central office working with the administrators and the staff at the different schools, what the items are identified by those schools that are needed in order to make sure they continue to support the students. Those are all compiled, they're assessed, they're ranked, and determining which ones are needed and which ones either can be accomplished in some other way or maybe are not as high a priority for this given year. And that's what this list is here, are those items by school. You'll see they're color-coded red, yellow, and green. The green being items that were identified as needed in the budget. And then the yellow are items that were considered and at this point either are something we can fulfill or would be looked at later should there be budget available. And then the items in red are future items. So we carry what we call a parking lot. So each year as the budget cycle starts, you go back through and look at things that were identified as needed in the past, but may not have been executed in that given year. Is it something we still need? If so, we should consider it now into the next year's budget. Next slide. So the budget breakdown, again, as you can see, just over 73% of the budget is salary and wages. That's our largest, of course, cost with the amount of staff that we have. So it makes sense there. The rest of the items are smaller percentages. As a data point, the insurance and benefits, of course, does not include healthcare. That is covered on the town side of the budget. But we want to note that that's why that's a small number here in our side of the ledger, but in the overall ledger budget, the public school employees are covered as well under the town healthcare, which is part of the state plan. Based on this is our, and we'll talk about this when we get, if there are any questions on the contingency plan update. As you can see with the large percentage of the budget being salary, there aren't any cuts to the budget. If the state were to make a reduction, results in loss of staff. There's not a lot of places over here in those other areas to really make up cost. Transportation has been a bill payer over the years, so there's not much margin left in there. And supplies are at the minimum, of course, and we're always looking to refine those. But the salary and wages is, while being the biggest item, is also the area with the most impact if we do have to make a reduction over time. Next slide, please. So again, just a quick review on the funding sources. Again, it's how our schools are funded has not changed from previous years. Basically, between the tax revenue and the educational cost sharing, it's roughly 90% of the school funding. There's some non-resident tuition, as you can see, a small percentage for students coming in from outside of Ledyard. And then there's some federal impact aid, which Mr. Hartling and his staff have worked hard over the last couple of years to try to increase that by getting more awareness of the value of filling out those request forms and identifying eligible families to help get that impact aid. And then there is the agricultural, the agri-science program tuition. But the large percentage is the town appropriations in the ECS, again, being about 90%. Next slide. Won't spend much time on the estimated revenue. It's pretty straightforward. This is just a summary of what's in the current budget and what the proposed increases are as far as revenue, both for what we expect from the state of Connecticut and the federal revenues. And then there's the tuition-based revenue for non-resident students and agri-science. And again, this is, these are estimates. I know we all will see final numbers come in over the year, of course, like we have in previous years. So under the forecasted enrollments, this is our running total from, of course, 2016. As you can see, for 21-22, we did have an increase in total number of students. And for the upcoming school year, 22-23, we're expecting another increase again. There are families moving into Ledyard. That's a good thing. But again, as we increase the number of students, of course, there are additional costs that go with that. So this budget reflects the projected student enrollments and those increases for the upcoming year. Next slide, please. And then this is a breakdown by school. The main thing here to note is that there are a couple of the schools that are looking at projected increases. Not dramatic, but increases none the same, so that trend tends to grow. And of course, if it grows enough, we run into issues with staffing again and making sure we have adequate classroom space for students. And that was talked about quite a bit during our budget development cycle on the Board of Ed, that making sure, we don't have a lot of extra rooms, if you will, if we did have to break classes up because of class size. So we monitor this very closely to make sure we know exactly which schools are projected to have increases and that we're properly allocating resources accordingly. Next slide, please. And this is the slide that covers the middle school and the high school. And again, as you can see, the actuals for 2021, for now, as of October 2021, of 770 for 9 through 12 at the bottom, projected to go up by a couple of students. And at the middle school, we're expected to increase a little bit more there going into the next year. As you can see, that trend tends to go up and down a little bit over the future years. These are purely projections based on the state's resources that give us estimates of families and who's expected to come in where. It also reflects if students stay in Ledyard, if there's a bubble in the elementary school, eventually that bubble continues up through the middle school and the high school. So again, these for 2022, it's an estimate. We don't actually get final student counts until into the September, October timeframe, sometimes with late enrollments. But the budget reflects these projected changes. And we monitor this accordingly, and it's something that's reported on at the board meetings as changes come in. And next slide, please. So just a summary, again, this is an approved budget request from the Board of Education. That total request is $34,555,319, or $883,349, which is a total of 2.62%. Again, with 1.41% of that being salary increases alone. Thank you. So questions?
Any counselors have any questions?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Mary.
The boot camp for the children coming to kindergarten, is that open to every child that would be going to kindergarten? Because I counted about, right now, there's 189 children in kindergarten, if I'm doing it right.
Is Mr. Hartling online?
Hi, good
I
evening. This is
think-
Mr.
Because I
Hartling.
know there's some subtleties
so-
to that number.
So can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
I'm
we
I'm
can.
managing two computers here. So the idea is that we would target this for those students who had not participated in pre-K programming, those students who may have additional needs identified during screening, but generally open to that population of students. Again, it's designed to be a transitional activity for those students who need that additional support so that when the first day of school starts, they can feel successful and comfortable in their schools.
Okay, and how many children can you accommodate? Or,
So we're gonna flex with that, Ms.
Okay.
McGrath. And so it'll be anywhere between 30 and 60 at each of the two elementary schools.
okay,
And then if we have to look for additional resources, that's something I'll bring to the Board of Education at that point.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I
Any
just-
other count? Go
Something
ahead.
new. This is definitely a new idea for us as we look at improving transition for students into K. So we'll see how it takes off in the community, and we may decide it's more effective.
Thank you. Mr. Soms.
Thank you. Roxanne, could you please share the presentation again and go to slide 17, which is in the backup data? And while you're doing that, I just want to comment on it. For the last 2 or 3 years, Ledyard has had the lowest per pupil expenditure in New London County. And we're very proud of that and at the same time concerned.
Right.
I'm proud of it because I think Ledyard schools have been and are a great deal, meaning an exceptional value for the taxpayer. But I think we also have to pay very close attention to that because we are significantly behind the other towns in the county. And as I recall, a couple of years ago, we were also, New London County, I think, was last in the state. But if I'm reading these numbers correctly, at the bottom of the slide, it says Ledyard is 160. I assume that's our position.
Yes.
In 169 towns in the whole state, we're number 160. Again, an exceptional value for the taxpayers, but I think we also need to pay attention to that because it's a concern. I know you can't guarantee good education by throwing money at it, but at the same time, if you don't spend enough, you run a very strong risk of not getting the best education. And I recall back, 10 years, 15 years ago, we used to get presentations from the Board of Ed about how our students fare in test scores compared to the rest of the state. And I don't have a marker for that anymore. So I can't tell you that this low rate of spending is a good thing or a bad thing. But again, I am concerned. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Ryan?
Yeah, just to piggyback on Bill's comments on the per pupil expenditures, having seen, the per pupil expenditure to me is a very high level metric. And until you drill down into what's spent within that per pupil expenditure, you really can't tell what it's being spent on and to what value it is to the student itself. A case in point, in New London, I once upon a time did a deep dive into what their per pupil expenditure was, and they were double the state average for per pupil expenditure on administration. I mean, so that's not a direct value to the student. So I would just caution people when they look at these numbers, to the point that Bill was making, is that this doesn't necessarily correlate to the quality of education that the students are receiving. But it is a metric to monitor, but it isn't the end all be all. And we should dive deeper before making any judgment calls on what this per pupil expenditure is actually doing for our students. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other councilors have comments?
Absolutely.
Questions? Okay, Mr. Irwin?
Is it possible we can go back to slide number 6, I believe it was, that kind of breaks down some of those things a bit more? Particularly that kindergarten boot camp. It looks like some of that money was dedicated to salary, and I wanted to know whether that was intended to be a long-term commitment from us, or if that's intended to hire somebody for 1 year at each school. I think it's GFS and GHS.
This is Mr. Hartling. That's actually representative of stipend dollars. So we wouldn't be adding FTEs. That's compensation for the staffing for those, for that period of time.
That explains that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other councilors? Okay, Mr. Braun and Mr. Hartland, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the potential flexibility tonight based on our earlier meeting. So we appreciate the offer.
Nope, I completely understood when I got that email that, yep, we work around your schedule.
We appreciate the time tonight.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. At this point, I'll open the floor up to residents or property owners who wish to address the council. Is there anybody who would like to address the council? Seeing no one. One more call. Okay. Commission board reports, comments of town councilors. Councilor Psalms.
I just want to thank the residents and property owners of Ledyard for approving the $6.7 or so million school roof investment. Very pleased that the people saw fit to make that investment. We were worried about the low turnout, so a lot of work went into putting those proposals together, getting the funding, and especially getting the grants. So thank you to the residents and property owners and the Board of Ed and the town for putting that whole thing together.
Okay, thank you. Any other councilors have comments? Mr. Irwin.
I'd like to thank the Board of Education and the superintendent staff for putting together a great budget for next year. It looks like it's well considered. Every item is very needed in the system, and I appreciate their thoroughness in that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councilor Rodriguez.
I concur with Councilor Irwin. Being a past BOE members, both Councilor Irwin and I, we know how hard they work on the BOE budget. It is a lean budget, and it's worked on in a methodical way, very conservative. And as Mr. Bronner has stated, 1.41% is contractual. So I'd like to thank them for that budget. And also, I would like to thank Councilor Psalms for attending the girls basketball game at Ledyard High School. Athletic Director Bunicor came out and said that the girls are very appreciative of all the positive comments and the signs that were held for them. I know board member Mary Harris and Brandon Graber were there also. And they very much appreciated it, but I wanted to let you know what I saw. When the opposing team, Waterford, came in their bus and they came off the bus, the residents of Ledyard were clapping for them and cheering them and saying, "Welcome to Ledyard." They really appreciated that. And also Athletic Director Bunicor came out and wanted to let us know that the girls ECC indoor track, the girls indoor track won ECC division. And so we all clapped for them also. So kudos to everyone who came out. There were about 30 plus Ledyard residents. And I just wanted to say thank you to the Ledyard residents who came out. The girls really appreciated it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilors wish to make any comments? Did you have your hand up, Mary?
No.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I'm scratching my nose.
My only comment I'd like to say is to is kind of echo the comments of Councilor Irwin and Councilor Rodriguez. I do thank the Board of Education for the hard work and putting their budget together. The town council is about to go through similar once we receive the mayor's budget here. I know the mayor's working through his line items. So we do appreciate the effort, and thank you for putting together a responsible budget. So I'll leave it at that. But thank you very much. Moving on, do I hear a motion to approve the prior meeting minutes?
So moved, Counselor Ryan.
Is there a second?
Second, Counselor McGrattan.
Roxanne, please call the roll. Or actually, any corrections, deletions?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
It's very minor. Page 7, under my quoted statements. Page 7, last paragraph, third line. It says it misspells pilot. Just want to correct that. Instead of PIOT, should be PIOLOT.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Roxanne, please call the roll.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Soms,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Engel,
Yes.
Mr. Irwin,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Paul,
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. So you have the communication list, information on the portal. There are no referrals, council, subcommittee, liaison reports. I will start with admin.
Admin has not met since the last council meeting. We have 2 items in tonight's consent calendar and 1 other item on the agenda, and that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for admin? Okay, community relations.
Community Relations met Wednesday, February 16th via Zoom. We are going to do something for Black History Month. Counselor Rodriguez worked on being able for us to hold a contest for the middle school and the high school for an essay contest and a poster contest for the elementary schools. So we are going to be doing that. I believe we're still kind of working out some of the details. We got some judges. The Sergeant McKinney from the Ledger Police Department is going to be one of the judges. And we that's going to be, I think, it end on the 28th, I think is the deadline for that. But that's what we're working on for that. We're going to keep that on our agenda. We hope to do something even bigger next year for that. We also are putting together and starting to work on bringing in some formal and informal informational sessions, such as with the police department. That's kind of where we're working now, along with the Mashantucket tribal, and doing some other things possibly with the fire department. And that's what we are continuing to work on.
Okay.
And that is my report.
Thank you. Any questions for community relations? Finance.
I'm going to apologize. This is a relatively long report, so I'll just read fast and try and cut it short. So we had 2 meetings. We conducted a public information forum by video conference on February 15th. We had 31 attendees. Committee was pleased with the number of residents that turned out for the session and presented a list of projects currently under consideration for the $4.3 million the town is receiving in ARPA funding. We identified the estimated cost for each project, a method of prioritizing the projects based on multiple criteria, and we discussed adding a new criteria, which is avoiding recurring expenses after the funds are spent. Several residents offered comments, questions, and suggestions, and the information seemed to be well received. The committee asked that residents send their comments in writing and suggestions to the town council and/or the mayor by March 28th. Both the presentation and the current list, which is a work in process, are posted on the town's website. Several of the projects will be added to the capital improvement plan for the fiscal 22-23 budget, so the taxpayers have a final opportunity to weigh in before they vote on the town budget. The Town Council Finance Committee held its regular meeting last Wednesday at 5 p.m. by video conference. Finance Director Matt Bonin reported that the budget meetings with the department heads are continuing and reviewed current revenue and expenses halfway through the fiscal year. He reported that the tax collection rate is projected to run at least 95% of the amount budgeted, but that other revenues are down in at least two areas. One, Ledyard VNA. I won't go into great detail, but that's been a continuing trend for us with VNA. It's out of their control. It's due to competition. And secondly, Board of Ed projections are down about $240,000 from budgeted revenue for tuition, which is always difficult to predict, as Mr. Bronner mentioned. VOAG revenue is projected to be higher than budgeted. Mr. Bonin also reported that the $286,000 Board of Ed budget surplus for the year ending June 2020, had not been moved to the board's capital reserve fund due to an oversight, but that the funds would be moved and it would reflect a lower amount for the town's undesignated fund. The budget for that year and the audit show that the funds were properly accounted for. They just weren't actually moved when they should have been. So the finance director will be making a procedural change to ensure that this does not happen again. And the Board of Ed did not have a budget surplus in the year ending 2021 due to an advanced purchase of IT services, so that we will not need to move funds in 21. And everything else is on our agenda for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for finance? Land use.
Land use has not met since the last town council meeting. We do have two items on the agenda tonight.
Okay, thank you. Any question for land use? Liaison reports. Councilor Psalms.
For WPCA, they met last night. The Gallup Hill water tank demolition has still not been started. Stanford Wrecking is the contractor, and they have recently been busy with a project in New London. Councilors should Google the firm. They have not responded to multiple requests for a start date from Groton Utilities, and there have been some articles about them in the newspaper. We're not concerned, but Groton Utilities is keeping after them to get that project done. WPCA has ordered the feed pump that was approved by the council for ARPA funding, and they expect delivery of the feed pump for the sewer plant in June. Geotech, the contractor that will do the testing for bedrock, needs a meeting with the planner, the mayor, and I believe that was being worked on today due to a flurry of emails. Geotech is doing testing to see if there's bedrock for when we put the sewer line extension in. It's a neat technology that lets us understand better where to route the sewer line. Let's see. Also, the WPCA approved their sewer budget in the amount of $687,000. The council does not vote on the sewer budget, but we do vote on the water budget, and they recommended a water budget of $1.5 million to the town. So we'll be seeing that as the budget comes our way very shortly. That's my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for WPCA? Do you have a question, John, or you have your?
Just a comment to the group. I wouldn't be too concerned about the contractor not starting the demo yet. A lot of contractors are having issues with labor, equipment, and supplies these days. It's the world we live in. We've been seeing it now real bad. Excuse me. The past couple of months, it's across the trades everywhere.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Council Marshall.
So I'm sure they'll be there soon. They're just
Yeah, we're not worried yet.
We're all
But
happy.
there've been quite a few delays, and Groton Utilities will stay on them. But thank you. But we're seeing that everywhere.
Any other liaison reports? John, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, the PNBC held a special meeting last night. Most of it paid some bills. We did discuss a few things. The one of the boiler rooms at the Gallup Hill School has excessive heat in the room, causing the adjacent rooms to be overly warm. Now in that area, there's one thermostat for like 4 or 5 rooms, so you really can't turn it down any. So we're going out for quotes and bids and how much it's going to cost to get rid of the heat in that room. The current contractor, Action Air, wants nothing to do with this project. They want to finish up their contract with ONG and be done with it. The additional gym pads we added under the basketball hoops at Gallup Hill are working quite well. I don't remember that, but when they striped the court and put the hoops up, they found out that the room was a little bit smaller than they thought it was going to be. And the kids are coming awful close to smacking into the wall. So we got additional pads added under the nets. That was a zero cost to the town. One item on the agenda for discussion was radon testing and monitoring at the Gallup Hill Elementary. And then we started talking about it, so why don't we monitor all our schools? You know, why just pick the one? So we're going out for we're looking into what it's going to cost to monitor and test all of our schools for radon, not just one. And we're looking for a firm or organization that could help us with the project closeout documents and audit preparation. We need a contractor that can assemble all the records and documents and organize them to kind of streamline the audit process by the Office of School Construction Grants. There's a lot to it, and this can be a lengthy process. So if we can get someone that can help us streamline that, it's going to help everybody. We're doing some work in our high school auditorium. I'm not sure the start date yet, but the auditorium needs a new sound system, improved lighting. It's kind of old and substandard. We need a new curtain. It's ripped and worn and showing its age, and a new stage floor. This is all part of the Board of Ed capital plan, so it's already been accounted for. The good news is the stage is structurally sound, so it's basically cosmetics and a few other goodies. And back to the roof project, town engineer Steve Maslin is coming to talk to us, I believe, next week about that project. And I'll be reporting back on what he has to say about that and in the future. And that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilor Marshall? Okay, seeing none. Any other liaison reports? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, everybody. I'll start with the referendum, which Councilor Soms touched on. Just over 2% of our voters turned out, but voted 193-12 in favor of getting the roofs done for Gales Ferry School, JWL, a building management system, and air conditioning at JWL. So I thought that was a plus. We got that done. Now we're going to move ahead from there. Just really brief on COVID, huge declines in COVID cases, literally 10% of what they were about a month ago. So it's gone way down. As of this afternoon, L&M reported 9 total hospitalizations with 0 in intensive care and 0 on ventilators. So that was a plus. A quick update on Eversource. You're going to start seeing some activity along the Clark farm. You've probably seen a couple white tents that were set up along there on the parcel that we own across from the Preston Park. They were doing archaeological studies before they replace those utility poles, the large transmission line poles. And a similar project is happening on Vinegar Hill Road, I guess kind of behind Vinegar Hill Road in Whalehead. So they're going to be working on that. They're also doing a major overhaul of the Gales Ferry substation, which is at the corner of Whalehead and Route 12. So that will be increasing the power capacity, increasing redundancy. They're going to have a generator backup for the site and improved reliability upgrades. So that'll be starting second quarter of this year. Both those projects, as you may recall, include a little sweetener for the town for the Tri-Town Trail, which is that Eversource is going to be installing at their cost 2 gravel parking lots, engineered gravel parking lots for the Tri-Town Trail, one over by the Red Steel building at the Clark farm and the other one at the parcel directly across from the Preston Park. A comprehensive zoning regulation rewrite is in progress right now. There is an informational session tomorrow with the Planning and Zoning Commission. That's at 5:30 p.m. It's a hybrid meeting, so you can attend in person at the Town Hall Annex or online. But the regs are coming along nicely. I reviewed the 139 pages of them for the last couple weeks, and they're coming along nicely. Also important to note, the short-term rental ordinance is sunsetting next week, at which point the new regulations will take effect, which will allow hosted short-term rentals only. Letters are going out to all current short-term rental owners now with a copy of the regulations so that they're aware of them as we move forward. Just another quick touch on DEMIS, the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, had a meeting the other day where they had they let us know that the state was clearing out their warehouse stock for things like cots, COVID test kits, hand sanitizer, masks, etc. So I think it's, again, just a writing on the wall that we're coming way down in terms of test cases. It's not to say that that won't ramp up again as we head towards next fall, but it's a good good signal for right now. As you recall, I reported on that fatal accident on Route 117 at our last meeting. Since then, Chief Rich has reached out to the Connecticut Department of Transportation to ask them to install centerline rumble strips on Route 117. You will experience those on Route 117 if you're heading from Ledyard Center towards Preston. They're there. It's designed to people that aren't paying attention maybe or falling asleep. It will wake them up very quickly once their tires begin riding on that rumble strip. We're also looking at the removal of at least one passing zone. There's 2 passing zones on that. Just keep in mind, it is a state road. It's not a town road. So the state has control of that, but we are asking based on 2 fatal accidents within the course of a year on that stretch of road, and hopefully we will get DOT's ear on that. The Board of Ed did deliver their budget. They actually delivered it a week early, so I have Board of Ed's budget. My work on the town side budget is almost complete. I reported to you last time that we were looking at about a 2 mil tax increase. I would tell you right now that we are at 0.2 of a mil based on the changes that we've made. And I'd still very much like to get that to 0, because last year, though we had a mill rate reduction, as you recall, we also had a reval year. And so with that, even though we had a mill rate reduction, many people saw a tax increase. So I would like to try to offset that year if we could. So that's something that we're still trying to pare down a little bit more, but I will be ready to pass that off on March 7th. Also have a budget a bond rating workshop coming up. This is what we do before we sell bonds. We meet with bond counsel and some advisors, and we start pulling together our facts and our presentation to be ready to sell ledgered bonds and get the most favorable rates that we can. So that'll be taking place at the end of March, and hopefully we will keep our fingers crossed for very good news on that. And the last item is that we were on February 16th, we were awarded a $112,000 Connecticut Trails grant from Connecticut DEEP. And this is for the 2nd phase of the Tri-Town Trail. So this will include planning in terms of planning the route of the trail, design, and then ultimately work. So we're waiting on the final documents from the state of Connecticut to be able to sign those, but we did receive the award letter, so we know that's coming. And that is all I have for you tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the mayor? Well, seeing none. Very good. Thank you, Mayor. No old business. Would anybody like to amend the agenda under new business? Hearing none. Would somebody like to move the consent calendar?
So moved.
Moved by
Second,
Councilor
Councilor
Marshall.
Ryan.
Second, okay. Discussion?
I couldn't hear. Who was that?
Councilor Marshall
Don Mar-
moved and Councilor Ryan seconded.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, discussion? Roxanne, call the roll.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Soms,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles,
Yes.
Mr. Irwin,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Ms. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Paul,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item, admin.
Sure. So I move that we adopt an ordinance regarding voting district boundaries as contained in the draft dated January 5th, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second, Counselor Ryan.
Okay, motion seconded. Any discussion?
So, Chairman, through you, during the public hearing, I had stated a concern of mine about how there might be a disconnect between the charter and the actual ordinance itself. And I just want to clarify, you had given me an explanation, and I thank you for that, regarding the history behind how the town charter had delineated not less than 2 voting districts. And the proposed ordinance itself actually does talk to voting district boundaries. So I'm pretty sure my concern still is there, but it's not something that's going to hold up tonight's vote for me, at least. But I still think we'll have an issue if and when we ever get back to 1 assembly district, at least with, you know, the conflict between the charter and the ordinance. And one of those is going to have to be updated, I think. But again, that's nothing that's holding me up tonight. It's more or less something that I want people to be aware of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
So I just want to just share again that just the history of this. So every 10 years, there's a US Census and congressional districts are redrawn. So the ordinance was drafted in accordance with the town charter, which states that our voting districts shall not be increased or decreased except by ordinance of the town council. So this ordinance is written so that the voting districts will be in conformance with the lines of congressional districts, Senate districts, or assembly districts as established by law. As Councilor Ryan pointed out, there will be a discrepancy if our numbers decrease, if we were to ever to go to 1, because our charter specifically states there shall not be less than 2. So at that point, if that were to ever happen, we would need to address that in the charter. Also, a resident brought forth and the idea of making sure that the district map is available on the website. And I completely agree. Residents should be able to find out very quickly and easily where their voting district is. The registrars are working now on how to notify. This is a little tricky, and I've heard that there are even going to be situations where your neighbor across the street, depending on where you are, your neighbor across the street might be in a different voting district. So, so the registrars are working on that, but this ordinance is meant to be pretty generic and simply state that that our voting districts shall conform with congressional districts. So our registrars looked at it, our clerk looked at it, and the director of elections at the state looked at it and all gave the thumbs up.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Mr. Ryan?
Just to follow up to what Andra said, Mr. Jacob Hurt was the one who provided that comment in the public forum. And to echo Andra's comment about the ordinance being generic in nature, that's true. And I think Mr. Hurt's suggestion was to include language in the ordinance that was specific to the current map. I'm not sure I agree with that based on what Andra just stated in terms of being generic in nature, but what I do agree with, and I'm hoping gets to the intent of what Mr. Hurt was proposing, is making easily accessible the new boundary maps in a way that it's clear to residents what voting district they are in. And that's something we can organically update on the website. So.
I will say, if you look at the state maps, the way that they're provided, I can't look at that map and say which side of the street is in which district. And that's what's provided by the state of Connecticut. That
Right.
sets, when they do the redistrict, when when the assembly does the redistricting, or the special group that gets put together, and then they provide that map. I've never been able to get a copy of that map where I could blow it up in such a way where I can actually go look at to see where a boundary actually lies. So that's just
Sounds
me.
Sounds like we need to talk to the Secretary of State, but the truth of the matter is that I agree with you on that subject, but when that new district map comes into reality, I am assuming that the Secretary of State's voter database will be updated, and we could easily provide a link to the SOTS webpage that will allow people in one place off of our Ledyard page to be able to look up what voting district they're in through the SOTS webpage and correlate that back to our voting districts. You know, just it's getting all the data into one place to make it easier and accessible. So,
right. I just got a question. Will District 3 districts, maybe 3 polling places? That is up to the registrar of voters to determine where the polling places are. So I know in the past we've had 3 districts before, so we're currently, the previous election was still, we still have 3 districts. But that is, and right now the two districts that are in Gales Ferry vote in the same polling location.
That's true, Kevin. I would just add one quick thing too, which is that the Secretary of State's website does have a page where you can key in your address and it will tell you exactly what district you are in. And on a very granular level down to the 169 municipalities. So, because I agree with you completely, the map is completely illegible. To try to read that and blow it up to anything that you could actually comprehend, it does not really work.
Right. Okay. And I know Jessica makes a comment about the GIS system. I'm not sure if the GIS is the right place to put voting districts. That's because that's handled through, that's through the Secretary of State and through the State Election Commission. So I'm not sure if the GIS is the right place to go put that. I think to Councilor Ryan's point, or what stated earlier, the best thing is point to the state website to tell you what district you're in.
Right.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. With that said, Roxanne, please call the roll.
Mr. Soms,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingles,
Yes.
Mr. Irwin,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Paul,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan.
Yeah, mute, Tim.
sorry about that. Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item, finance.
As Councilor Solms, I move to appoint Clifton Larson Allen LLP to conduct auditing services for the general government, WPCA, and schools for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022, in accordance with Chapter 3, Section 11 of the Town Charter. In addition, grant a bid waiver to Clifton Larson Allen LLP in fiscal year 22 in the amount of $66,800 due to receiving fewer than 3 bids as a result of RFP 2022-09 for fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023 auditing services.
Is there a second?
Second, Councilor Ingalls.
Discussion.
So we originally thought we would receive 3 bids, and then it was down to 2 bids or 2 companies that were intending to bid. The second company that we thought would bid then asked for an extension. on the RFP timeline. And the town has had difficulties with our past auditing firms looking for extensions and being late with the audit itself. So they were not granted an extension. We thought that was a bad signal. So we ended up with one bid from our present auditing firm. And I think many of us here on the council will agree from past history that Clifton Larson Allen LLP was a breath of fresh air when we first started working with them. They have a history, and I don't know how many years it is now, 5 or 6 probably, of doing exactly what we had asked the previous firm to do, which is we spend all this money, we get voluminous reports and audits and financial statements, and we say, okay, so what are your recommendations? And the previous firm gave us none. So we solicited specifically looking for a firm who could give us some advice. And in fairness to all accounting firms and auditors, they have to be very careful about what recommendations they do give and what management advice they give. So there are lines that they can and don't cross. But every year we've got a management letter from CLA which says, you know, here are our findings. Some are serious, some are not so serious. And here are the things that you could be doing to close up and tighten up some of the processes in town hall. And we have followed those recommendations. And this past year, the audit we just received this past month, there were no findings as a result of that continued partnership and, you know, looking for how we can do the job better. So we're pleased with this firm. And I should also mention that we received an additional benefit. One of the partners there, the one we had been working with, actually accepted the job, applied for and accepted, and we offered the job of finance director. So Mr. Matt Bonin, our new finance director, as many of you know, came from CLA. So he has a good working relationship with them. He's confident with the firm, and I am too.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none. Roxanne, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Engel,
Yes.
Mr. Irwin,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Paul,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
yes,
Mr. Soms,
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item.
I move to authorize overspending the legal fees account number 101-10101-5310 for legal expenses through June 30, 2022. Funding to be transferred to the legal account 101-10101-5310 at year end.
Is there a second?
Second, Counselor Ingalls.
Discussion.
So this legal fees account is used to pay our attorneys who represent us in tribal issues, as well as our town attorney. And as a matter of strategy and practice, the Finance Committee did not discuss a dollar amount to cap the legal fees over expending. And we do that again as a matter of strategy. But I'm also going to suggest that we consider having an executive session to talk about strategy and specifically what we think we should be spending on legal fees. The council does that periodically with the mayor, and we haven't done it in a couple of years. So I reached out to both the mayor and Chairman Dombrowski and said, I think we should do that again. There are 2 things you can hold an executive session in for. One is to discuss strategy and contracts, and this is strategy regarding legal issues, and the other is for employee issues. An executive session allows the council to have a discussion without having to take minutes, without having to report what the discussion is. We come out of the session and we have a better understanding of some of the decisions we need to make. So I think it's time to do that, and I think at that point, we should talk more about whether we want to put a cap on the legal fees over extension. But the point is, we have about $16,000 left, and we don't think that that's going to be enough to pay the fees for this year.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilor Ryan.
Not a question, just a statement. I appreciate Bill giving us the background and requesting the executive session. That's something I support and would enjoy being a part of. It does, I will admit that it does make me a little uncomfortable with an open-ended budget item like this. I understand there's a strategy element to it, but I try to put myself in the shoes of the taxpayer and viewing a budget item that essentially has no cap on over expenditure. Just it doesn't sit right with me. But at the same time, I do appreciate the strategy aspect of it. But it is something I think that some of us, well, I won't speak for anybody, but myself, I would benefit from a little education on. So thank you, Bill, for offering that up, or at least requesting it. I mean, thank you.
Certainly.
Just to kind of follow up on that, I have asked Roxanne to put this as an executive session topic for our next meeting in March. We also do have another executive session coming up on contract discussion, so we're going to add it to that.
I just wanted to add, Councilor Rodriguez here, I just want to add that I concur with Councilor Ryan.
Okay, thank you.
So is there a time constraint on this? Like, can we table this until after an executive session?
Yeah, go ahead, Mayor.
I was gonna say, we have time. We're not at the point of overexpending at this point, so we have time.
Okay. Then I would recommend we table it.
So that all you need to do is make a motion under.
Okay, if you're gonna make are you making the motion to table?
I move to table.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion?
I don't think you discussed the motion to table.
No, that is true. I take that back. So Roxanne, please call the roll on the motion to table.
Mrs. Ingles,
Yes.
Mr. Irwin,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Paul,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Somm,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Yes,
9 in favor, 0 opposed to table.
motion carries.
Just a clarification, was there an original motion made and seconded?
Yes.
There was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does that need to be rescinded?
No, because we tabled
No.
it.
Okay,
That's why our option was to either reject the motion, approve the motion, or as what Andra did, make the motion to table it till our next meeting.
got you. Thank you.
Okay, next item, land use.
I move to adopt the proposed amendments to ordinance number 300-022, an ordinance establishing an agricultural commission for the town of Ledyard, has contained in the draft dated November 15th, 2021.
Second by Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you. Discussion.
So again, this is the Agricultural Commission completed their original scope of work. And this would add the language that they could expand their work to be an advocate to the farmers in town and be a liaison to the, as Councilor Ingalls discussed at the public hearing, would be a liaison to the council.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Roxanne, please call the roll.
Mr. Irwin,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Paul,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Somm,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes,
Mrs. Ingles,
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Next item.
I move to adopt the proposed amendments to ordinance number 300-009, an ordinance establishing citations for zoning violations as contained in the draft dated January 5th, 2022.
There a second? Good, thank you.
Second.
Discussion?
So again, as we discussed in the public hearing earlier, this is just removing some language. What this does is allow the zoning official to issue citations without having to go to the planning and zoning commission.
Any questions? Roxanne, please call the roll.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mrs. McGrattan,
Yes.
Mr. Paul,
Yes.
Mrs. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. Soms,
Yes.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Engel,
Yes.
Mr. Irwin.
Yes.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Motion carries. Is there anybody who'd like to make the next motion?
I make a motion to adjourn. Counselor Rodriguez.
Or a second?
Second.
Second that.
And I declare this
fight over
meeting, now you can fight over, there you go. I say the meeting is adjourned without exception. Thank you, everyone.
Night.
Thank you. Good
Good
night.
night.
Good, everyone.
Right.
All right, everyone, good seeing you again.